Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. There's plenty of those. So it's kind of like that first bit, like, hey, make sure you realize that you're going into a profession dealing with people, right? Like it really is tough. Some people are tough. So yeah, so I do think it's important. One of the things that I realized I had to realize about myself was my triggers. I don't know if you all have taken time to recognize your triggers. Do it. Take some time to do that. If you start getting frustrated with a patient or start getting impatient with them, or you start recognizing, because sometimes they're frustrated with you, who cares? But when you start getting frustrated with them, something's up. Like that's a problem there. So you have to figure out, like, why am I so frustrated with that person? Like, is it because they're not listening to you and you're giving really good advice? You're like, man, I'm smart. Like, with the flip, like, are you doubting me? Because sometimes it's like going to that humility piece as part of this. Like, they're questioning what I'm telling them, and that's hurting my pride, kind of thing, right? Or I'm talking for myself. Sometimes that's my trigger. Or say that you're dealing with somebody who just like consistently you're giving them time and time again the things to do, they're not doing it, so they're not getting better, and you're like, I don't know what to do for you because you won't help yourself. That's difficult because you're like, the trigger is that you're like banging your head against the wall because you're giving advice and just there's no listening going on. So that can get us frustrated. Or just like somebody who wants to play the blame game, like, this other PT did this and I'm mad at them for that. I could go on and on, right, about like tough personalities and tough difficulties, but the self-awareness part of it is, why is that person difficult for me? Kind of that I talked a little bit in there about like personality differences, right? Some people hate the personality test. Honestly, some of them I hate. Myers-Briggs, like I struggle with that one. It always puts me right in the middle, so I'm like, forget you. But anyway, there's some other ones too. I talked a little bit about the Enneagram. I talked about like strength builders or strength finders and all that. There's so many out there now. I take all of them with a grain of salt. And yet, if you can get pieces from them of who you are, it's sometimes really, really valuable. I found one of those tests at one point pointed out the fact that I really appreciate efficiency. I struggle in the clinic when things are not going efficiently. I will say that with my students as well as with my patients. Like, hey, I have these 5 things planned for us to do today, and you're talking to me about like, I don't know what, you're just going on and on about some story about your, grocery experience. Like we got things to do, like, let's go. So one of my triggers is like inefficiency. Or like Ariel was saying, like, I got some tests to go, like I got some tests to do. Like, this is so inefficient for us to be sitting here doing these things and talking about these things. So does that frustrate you? Or is it something you can recognize about yourself? Like there's, I don't know if anybody here uses WebPT, but WebPT has decided that now you have to log in twice. That is so inefficient. So I didn't know I was so mad about that. And I was like, it's because it's so inefficient. I do not need to log in twice. So anyway, you just kind of have to like recognize these things about yourself. Like, why is this person bothering me? I wrote a couple of these personality traits down. Maybe you guys can help me kind of like think through some of these. And I won't go through all of them because there's so many. But if you think about where some of those difficult patients come in, you have some people that are really straightforward about what's going on, or some people that are really want to like beat around the bush. So you have to figure out which one are you. Like, I'm a very blunt person. I need to like be straightforward, like, let's go. I don't need the beating around the bush thing. So sometimes self-awareness, I need to know that about myself. Why am I getting frustrated? This person's like trying to tell me something, but like they can't just get to the point. Are they concise, or are they storytelling? If they respect like a high pain tolerance, or if they're quick to come back to therapy, are they an independent person? Like, I can give them these things to do, or they're very dependent. Like, my gosh, like this person needs me to explain this again, because they're very dependent on me for their care, and they're dependent on me to tell them every little thing and how to do. I don't want you to be so dependent. I need you to be independent. And sometimes that can get frustrating, So, and again, knowing myself, I'm an independent person. So that frustrates me when people are so dependent and I'm trying to get them to be self-sufficient. If you have somebody that's vulnerable versus gritty, if you have a follower versus a leader, like they want to kind of dictate care versus just following along with what you're saying. Are they distracted or focused? Like if you want to be a very focused physical therapist and you're like, man, I've been doing all these courses and I've been learning all these things and I have these things I want to zero in on, and yet your patient's like super distracted, like looking around, they're not focusing, they're being silly, it's the end of the day, or they're tired, they don't really want to do anything. You're like trying to give them cues, and then this could go so well, and the cues aren't working because they're not listening or they're not paying attention. Like, is that bothersome? So knowing that about yourself, am I somebody who just really needs to be focused? And so when people are unfocused, that bothers me, you know? What else do we got here? If somebody likes variety versus like really liking consistency. So I have some patients, I can teach them a new thing and they're freaking out because it's not part of the routine. It's not part of the normal. Like we have stepped out of the routine and now it's really challenging. On the other side of things, I am a person, again, probably the R2P people might laugh. I love variety. I love the neuromotor learning side of things. So I'm going to have like a purpose of the day. I'm going to teach somebody to use a positive tibial angle. So we're going to work on that. And I'm going to give you 5 different exercises, because if you can learn it in different settings and different varieties of movement, then you've got it. However, that's a lot of exercises to teach, right? Like that's a lot of things to teach and go through and whatever. I love that. I love variety. I love eating different food every night. I love reading different books every day. Like, so, but somebody who likes routine, I have to rein in my personality and I have to really stick to my program. And I probably only need to change 1 or 2 exercises, maybe every week, every other week. And I have to rein that in. So it's like part of like knowing your personality. So I can stop there because there's so many other things, black, white, self-discipline or not discipline, worrisome or laissez-faire. So I can like send you guys some of these if you want, or post them on Facebook, but there's so many different aspects of personality that if you're able to like be aware of that, it's not just like getting along better with your patients, but also like we said before, like being better at motivating them, or better at recognizing why they might be frustrated, or better at recognizing why there's some kind of a gap in compliance, like why aren't they showing up for therapy appointments, or why aren't they doing their ATP? That's like my biggest pet peeve. So like I can get a soapbox about that later, but trying to find those ways to connect with them for those things. So we have to know ourselves in order to know like, yeah, why that's going to matter to them. So anybody else have anything else from that section? It was good. All right. So I did want to talk through, and I want to make sure we're aware of you guys' times. I know it's a little bit late for some of us East Coasters, so we'll do about 10 more minutes, and then we'll kind of wrap from there. One of the things listed in that self-care piece also is there's like this big, I would say push almost in the physical therapy world about people talking about burnout. There's not many of us that make it past 7 years. So another part of that self-care, or that self-awareness, self-care piece, was just kind of making sure that all of us have ways to get away from PT and unwind and balance, you know, talk about like work-life balance and that kind of stuff. I was just curious if any of you in particular took note of that section and was kind of like, yeah, like especially new grads, like how do you figure out that work-life balance where you're not just going nuts and feeling burnout by all of the notes that you have to do at night and all the patients you have to think through and plan through, or even some of that emotional stuff that you guys have been talking about that like you take home with you, because that's really tough. Like I was a little frustrated for a couple of days when my lady with a double mastectomy, I can't get her more care. So how do you not take it home with you? Does anybody have anything in particular, like balance wise, like limiting burnout kind of wise, figuring out life balance?
I think kind of tying this back in with the self-awareness piece, and like the personality clashes. So like obviously you want to do whatever it is that you can do with a certain person and like be flexible with them and meet them where they are. But I also think it's important to realize that like some people you're just not going to see eye to eye with, and there's going to be people who like just do not get better under your care. And whether that's like trying to refer them to a different clinician within your clinic, or if it's like, oh well, I'm sorry, like this is what I can offer you. I think you just have to be like realistic that like we want to help everybody. We can't help everybody. Like there's going to be people out there who just like think they want our help, or they don't like what we have to offer for them and stuff. And I think that you just have to like come to terms with that at times. Um, Now again, that's not to say that like the instant that like you and that person don't see eye to eye, that you're just like, oh, it's my way or the highway. But at a certain point, you have to just realize like, okay, like I've tried to really work with this person, and it's like it just it isn't working. So like maybe somebody else is going to be able to like offer you something better that I can't. Um, and yeah, kind of just like having that in mind, and then trying not to beat yourself up too much, because like there's a lot of people who you work with who are going to like love everything that you do. Going to be some people who it's going to be a little bit tougher to get the buy-in, and then there's going to be some people who again just like they don't buy into it like whatsoever. So not going home and like beating yourself up too much about those few who really don't buy into it, and maybe trying to like remind yourself, like taking away one positive thing from the day or something, like, oh well, like yeah, that end of the day was really tough, but you know what, whatever, so and so like really is doing well, and they like loved what we did today, and like they're progressing so well, as opposed to like just solely focusing on like, wow, that was a horrible interaction I had with that person. So I think that's something like to remember.